Hi, Madison. How are
Hi.
you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being a part of Finding the Good. Madison is actually the first person that I'm interviewing who I actually don't really personally know. I think it was maybe a few weeks back or months ago. I had posted on the account, like, hey, if you have a story or know someone with an incredible story, tag them. And so my Aunt Christina actually tagged Madison, connected us. They go to church together, and so I'm so excited that you're going to be sharing your story with us today. And she has her daughter Libby with us, and her story is about Libby. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, Madison, and then maybe just a few things about Libby.
Yeah. My husband and I, we met when I was still in high school. We got married when I was 19. So we've been married for almost 3 years now. And we got pregnant with Libby about a year and a half ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually had some health complications that we were completely unaware of. And so the day after she was born, we ended up taking her to the emergency room and figuring out that she was born with Down syndrome and that she had a heart defect that she would need surgery for.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So go ahead and talk a little bit about Libby's birth story. Kind of walk us through it. Like, I think you talked about normal pregnancy, everything was fine. So just share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I had a perfect pregnancy, nothing to complain about. Every ultrasound was great. We never got genetic testing just because there was no red flags. And it didn't make a difference to my husband and I if something was wrong, but we definitely didn't expect something to be wrong. And I had her in a birthing center, and we took her home a few hours later, and the midwives had kind of pointed out a few things like, oh, she's not grasping like she should, and she just has some lower muscle tone. And so they told us to take her to a pediatrician.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we had my mother-in-law staying with us, who's a nurse. And the next morning we woke up and Liberty was very blue. Her feet and her hands were very, very blue. And she was just looking at some different characteristics that she had. And she kind of sat us down because when taking it back a little bit, when Liberty was first born, she first came out, I had taken a picture of her and I sent it to my mom and my mother-in-law. And I said, be honest with me, does it look like my kid has Down syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it looked exactly like she did.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, she's just puffy. But flash forward the next morning, my mother-in-law sat me down and she was like, do you remember how you had asked me this question? And she was like, I've been looking up just some symptoms, characteristics, and she has a lot of them. I think it's time to take her into a pediatrician. And so we did. And we had no idea about the heart defect. We just thought maybe it was something funny with having Down syndrome that she was so blue.
Yeah.
But when we got to the pediatrician, he made us sign a waiver that said if we don't immediately take her to the emergency room, like her death is on our hands and not on his.
Wow.
And by the time we had gotten there, she literally took just a really bad turn just within the hour driving there. And she was completely blue from head to toe. And they grabbed her and they rushed her back and had her on oxygen and had done every test within 5-10 minutes. It was crazy. And so then a doctor came in about 30 minutes after having her there, and he asked us, he was like, did you know that she was going to be born with Down syndrome, or is this a surprise to you? And we were totally not caught off guard, but it's like I thought it, but when you hear it, it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And so he then proceeded to tell us about her heart condition, and we were in the NICU after that for about a week until we were able to bring her home.
Wow. And so, like you said, you had no idea that she was going to be born with Down syndrome. And so, parents who know that their child is going to be born with Down syndrome, they're kind of able to process it, maybe make a game plan. I think there's some stuff you can try to plan out, but I know life always, it takes turns and stuff. So could you tell me a little bit how you felt when you found out that she had Down syndrome? Like you said, she went from taking a turn within an hour. And so I'm sure that's just a lot to process within that time frame. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, I had that moment where your heart kind of sinks a little bit. And not so much that I'm disappointed, but just I don't know what this looks like. This is completely unexpected. But my husband was there with me, and I was holding his hands, and we really, after the doctor walked out, we looked at each other and we were like, regardless of what happens, if this means it's super extreme or if it's super mild, if we're in the hospital for a long time, if we're in the hospital for a short time, whatever this looks like, we know that God's good. And once we really got rooted in that, everything else, I don't want to say it was easy, but emotionally it was easy. It was hard stuff to walk through, but there was such a weight lifted off that I knew if my kid doesn't make it through this heart surgery, God's good. And so being able to root myself in truth changed my perspective about everything going on. And no matter if everything else was shaken, that wasn't shaken.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think it's always about perspective and being grounded and rooted in God, and just kind of saying like, all right, this is out of our control. You take the wheel now. And so I know you talked a little bit about her condition already. How old is Libby? Is she 1 yet?
No, she's 8 months old, just turned.
Yeah. And so like I said, I know you talked a little bit about her condition. Have doctors told you like, okay, this is kind of like the way her life is going to play out? Or have they told you, the heart thing, is that something you guys are having to monitor? What does that look like for her?
So as far as having Down syndrome goes, they told us in the very beginning, we will not be able to tell how severe this is until she's older. Every kid is different. But right now where she's standing, she's very, very advanced. She's actually on a typical scale as far as milestones go and development and weight and height, which is super uncommon. Her physical therapist is absolutely shocked. So right now she's doing really, really well. But as far as severeness, that's not something we can really fully say until we get a little further into the future. And as far as her heart goes, she did have the heart surgery. It was very successful. For her case, they gave us a 1 in 4 chance of her having to have heart surgery again in the future. But the surgery was a lot more successful than they thought. So we haven't gotten a new percentage as to what that might look like, but she will, regardless of if she ever needs a surgery again or not, she'll be monitored for the rest of her life.
Wow.
So we'll always have heart appointments just to make sure everything's functioning properly. But right now she is totally in the clear and doing really well.
Well, she is so precious. So walking through this difficult, season, what would you say is the goodness that came out of it? Like, what has God showed you throughout this time?
I think there's two. The first being, I had no idea just how people in the disability community are treated. And so I've really used this as an opportunity to connect with an amazing community, with other moms that have kiddos that have Down syndrome or other disabilities. And I've actually been able to put myself in a place where I can advocate for them on social media. And that's just been incredible because you have no idea until you walk through it what it's like.
Sure.
And the other thing is my family has grown. Josh, Liberty, and I have grown so much closer together than I thought we ever would. When you walk through something where you're not sure if your child's going to make it or not, or what life's going to look like, it can either really pull you apart or really push you together. And we push into the Lord and we push into each other, and our family is so much stronger than it would have been before we had her, or would have been if she wouldn't have had Down syndrome. Even our extended family, like my mother-in-law and my mom, were much closer with all of them just because we bonded together as a family.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And so give us an update on life now, maybe what's like your day-to-day with Libby, how you and your husband are doing.
Yeah, so our day-to-day now is I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I stay with Liberty, and she has gotten through the majority of her super serious appointments. So we have occasional heart checkups. We have therapy once a week, but for the most part, it's just being a typical baby and enjoying going outside, playing, growing, learning. She's almost crawling, she's teething. And then my husband's working a lot now, but we have date nights and family nights, and we love going out with community now that she's healthier and we're able to do stuff. But I would say our life's pretty typical. I don't know if other people would say that, but I think it is.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing part of your story. Like I said, I love following you on social media, and I think you did a Q&A last week, and I can't remember what the question was, but your answer, you said something like, just because my daughter might have this disability, for anyone out there, like, don't let that rob you of that time that you have with your child. And so, you're 21. I think back when I was 21 and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I would have been able to handle something like that. And so I commend you and I admire you for that. And I think it's so great. I'm going to link all your social media stuff, but I think it's so great that you're doing that. You're creating this platform for people to be more aware of people who have Down syndrome. And I know it's not effortless, but you make it seem so effortless. And Libby she's just the cutest thing ever.
See, thank you.
So yes, thank you so much again for coming on and sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course.